Well, exactly so. And this is what Alina Lipp was finding. You speak out in ways which she believes to be correct. She may be correct, she may not be correct. But her speaking out and giving her view is now resulting in her bank account being frozen, her father's bank account, her mother's bank account being frozen, and she's facing 3 years in prison. This is totalitarian. This is liberal totalitarianism. And it's creeping in everywhere.
So let's come back to the Guardian here, and the headline is "Authors on the Salman Rushdie attack: A society cannot survive without free speech." That's a fairly
so here we've got the Guardian
comment.
The Guardian speaking up for free speech. Hooray! So they quote writer Margaret Atwood, who says, "Quote: Freedom of expression was foremost amongst these principles that Salman Rushdie embodied. Once a yawn-making liberal platitude, this concept has now become a hot-button issue, since the extreme right has attempted to kidnap it in the service of liable lies and hatred, and the extreme left has tried to toss it out of the window in service of their vision of earthly perfection." Now, I think even that is quite an interesting little examination of the situation, because here we've got a left-wing writer realizing that the left wing are anti-free speech, but characterizing those who say things she doesn't agree with as basically putting forward misinformation, libel, lies, and hatred. So that's not awfully free speech friendly for an article endorsing free speech. But of course, if you go back a little while in the Guardian's back catalogue, it gets much worse. So we've got one from September 2019, "The Myth of the Free Speech Crisis: How Overblown Fears of Censorship Have Normalized Hate Speech and Silenced Minorities." Nesreen Malik. We challenged this instrumentalization, gosh, there's not enough nouns in the English language for this lady, by reclaiming the true meaning of freedom of speech, which is freedom to speak rather than the right to speak without consequence. What happened to Salman Rushdie, the consequences she had in mind, I'm not sure. Challenging hate speech more forcefully, being unafraid to contemplate banning, no platforming when we think it's harmful to the public good. So it's all about the greater good, gentlemen, and being tolerant of objection to them when they do speak. Like the political correctness myth, the free speech crisis myth is a call for orthodoxy, for passiveness in the face of assault. So The Guardian just 3 years ago, was saying the free speech crisis is a myth. It doesn't exist. Don't worry at all. And, well, they're not saying that anymore, but even now, they're not exactly getting on board with the importance of being able to speak your mind freely and without fear for the consequences, because they're talking about, well, there should be consequences. But in fact, if people are mired by fear, they will not speak out, they'll self-censor, and this is how totalitarianism works. For another example, we go to the Telegraph, and this is part of the long march through the institutions. So a university has forced out a diversity advisor for supporting bullied Professor Kathleen Stock. So the diversity advisor sided with Stock, and this was viewed as unacceptable by activists within a union and anonymous staff in a trade union at the university who described themselves as senior LGBT plus champions, said his signature was particularly concerning given his role in EDI work at the university. So because he's meant to be defending diversity, his attempt to defend diversity of opinion and stop someone being hounded out of their job for their opinion, that makes it unacceptable for him to stay in post. So he got moved from his post, and then he felt he had no option but to quit the university. And he's warning of the far left. They've hijacked important issues, and senior leaders in the university have folded under the pressure and are actively removing anyone who dares to make their legal views known. The university told him in letters that his treatment was appropriate in the circumstances, as a formal process would not have been a supportive one for you, it said. So again, once again, we see there is no due process. Nowhere in any of this is there any due process. And then to come back again to the implications of the attack on Salman Rushdie, a case that we didn't cover at the time and perhaps really should have. This is the attack on a Christian preacher at Speaker's Corner. That's Hatun Tash, who's a convert from Islam and who has a ministry seeking to preach the gospel to Muslims. And she speaks at Speaker's Corner, and she was stabbed. She was stabbed in the head. And he would see the Daily Mail reporting on this. ITV also reported on it. They said Speaker's Corner is turning hostile, says a Christian preacher who was slashed in the head. She's quoted as saying, "It's a good platform for me to get challenged about my faith and also to critique the ideology of Islam," said Hatun. Speaker's Corner is a small place and sometimes it's difficult for individuals to control their emotions. I was dragged to the floor and slapped. Counter-terrorism officers are leading the investigation into the attack, but the incident is not being treated as terrorism-related at the time. Police are keeping an open mind about possible motives. Well, there we go. Now, the police open mind got a little bit worse because we see here the Spiked is investigating this, asking how Speaker's Corner became a war zone, and asking also what's happened to the press in this. And she said, "I wouldn't say I've been abandoned by the press, but I would say when it comes to certain groups, the media are very quick to keep silent. The media are choosing not to talk about it because there's a problem with Islam. There's a belief," she goes on, "that if we don't talk about it, everyone will be happy and people will forget." She says, the UK, Tash says, is known for giving dignity and honour to human beings. We need to make sure that remains the case, and amen to that. But this story gets a little darker because she has got into trouble with the police, despite being the victim in all of this, despite being entirely peaceful. And here we see the critics saying the police are enabling Islamic intolerance. So after the attack, Hatun was not deterred. She continues to preach bravely at Speaker's Corner, the home of free speech. Every Sunday, just days ago, on Sunday the 26th of June, she was arrested by police after having her Quran forcibly stolen from her. So she was arrested. She was a victim of a crime and she was arrested. In fact, actually, she spent quite a number of hours in cells. And this seemed to be an attempt to intimidate her to stop speaking. This is carried out by the police. This is extremely worrying. The critic finishes off here. Why is it that Hatun keeps getting arrested for committing no crime, while those who commit actual crimes are not apprehended by the police? The police are meant to carry out their duties without fear or favour, and they're not doing so. And this is an item we're going to come back to in an interview series, in an interview that we've done with Dia Moodley, a pastor at Spirit of Life Reformed Baptist Church in Bristol. This will be up in a few days' time on the column, and it looks into the persecution that has happened in Bristol of a church preaching in the street and the attempts and use of essentially legal threats by the police to shut down what is an entirely lawful activity protected by numerous legislation concerning free speech, concerning civil liberties, concerning just how people are meant to conduct themselves in the UK, concerning the common law. These people are peaceful and yet the police are closing them down. And why? They're closing them down in response to complaints from people who don't like what's being said. That is not the purpose or the duty of the police.